Hello everybody and welcome to our webinar. So today we're going to go through a lot of interesting stuff, so let's just get into it. First thing that we're going to do is create this beautiful scene, and you may already know that we're going to jump right into it, but before that I would like to tell you a little bit about myself and about our rendering school. So first thing, before we continue, let's see what is our end goal for today. Let's see if you can hear me. Is everything okay? So how's the chat? Oh, hello guys. So great to see you. Obviously we're going to take a lot of questions from you, so if you have any questions, just ask them now, and if they are going to be quite complicated, we may stay a little bit longer and answer them in a short Q&A session. So guys, in our audience there's going to be a little bit of our former students and our current students, so they're also going to be able to help you out, but we're also going to have a few of our guys in there. So guys, first thing, we are VizAcademy. So I'm the main teacher for VizAcademy, and with our great tutors, I'm going to be able to teach you in just 7 weeks how to become professional. So if you found that well, our Instagram is quite intimidating for you, I need to tell you that 75% of our students start with zero knowledge of 3ds Max whatsoever. Currently, if you think about joining our class, just do it, because we've got only six last seats available, and well, let's just pick some images by random, and as you can see, all of those works look really amazing. As I said, my name is Mike. I've got 14 years of experience, and that allowed me to, together with VizAcademy, to share all of my knowledge and obviously all of my experience, so you too can become a professional. Today, as I said, we're going to work on this beautiful scene. Let's first see what is our end goal. So we're going to go through modeling, then we're going to go through lighting, and obviously we're going to jump into our materials. All of that we're hoping to accomplish in under an hour. Will lighting be yes, we will talk about lighting, and we're going to do it as fast as possible. As I mentioned, we're going to try to allow you to follow this webinar, but you don't have to do it now, because all of this is going to be recorded, guys, so you can always go back to this video and watch it later. But for now, if you want to ask some questions, or you found something well, it should get a little bit more explanation, we're going to jump into it. So let's just quickly click on our first render to see what our end goal is. And obviously you can see that the background is now missing, because we're going to add it as well. So guys, without any further ado, let's get started. So all of you that are going to be interested in following this particular webinar, you can download those files that I'm going to use, the same PDF files, basically in JPEG format, and you will too be able to follow. I've got a little bit of cheat sheet, so in case something goes wrong, I'm going to be able to jump into it, but we're not going to really care about that, because this is what we're going to focus on mainly. So let's just hide all of that, because it's well, not needed for now. And where do you start when dealing with architecture like that? Since we want to create something like this, which is going to be quite complicated, and believe me, it's one of those images that your teachers are going to love and your clients are going to gasp about. So our first goal is to reach this level, because we first need to create our model, then we're going to create our light and materials. So this is our first step into on our way to glory. Can you show us? Of course I can, and I will, but you have to wait until we get into our materials. So where do you start? First, you need to position your floor plans. In this case, we used the same method that was mentioned in previous webinars, so you can just scale this according to your needs. And since we already have the measure, so 0, 1, 2 meters, and we scaled it up. So in our case, it was 1000 by 1500 and a little bit of scaling, so 260% of scaling. But where do you start, right? So let's start from the biggest chunks ever. That's why we're going to try to start from this super big element on the bottom. Why? Because it's going to be our base and it's going to really help us out along the way. But obviously it's not going to be that easy to just create it, because we obviously have a little bit extra elements in here. But more about it in a second. Let's now start modeling. For objects like this, I would definitely try to start with a simple line. Why? Because it's going to be fastest and easiest to follow. Then it's also going to give you the most freedom when you'll be in any need of extra editing or just to add extra changes. For now, I've added this floor plan just as a background on my on my very simple planner object. The next step is simply to add extrude modifier. Those of you that don't know how extrude works, it's just going to allow you to extrude your segments, and it's going to produce change your segment status from line to mesh. In this case, we're just going to put it down on 0, so when we start, it's going to absolutely not be a problem for us. So let's go for negative values, because what you should always strive for is to make sure that your ground on your object is on 0. It's going to make your work so much easier in the future. So this object doesn't really need to be a spline at this moment, but we're still going to keep it this way because there's a lot of stuff that we need to unpack. So since we've got our ground, we're going to keep it this way. For now, I'm going to freeze this selection, but when I do, it's going to get grayed out. So instead of that, I'm going to simply hide it. We could also put this object a little bit lower, but it's not going to be that helpful. By the way, guys, tell me where you're from, where you're watching us from, because I can now see that somebody is from Greece. So hello, is it Kalimera at this moment? I'm not sure, but I think it was something like that. So let's just start with our interior. Hello. So we're going to trace the outer line for our exterior, because that's the more important element for us at this moment. Notice that I'm not skipping the doorway. I'm continuing this shape, just so you know that you don't have to realign those elements. In this case, it's not going to be possible because it's already angled, so we're just going to try to go back to it if we need to. It's just about efficiency and not really anything else. At this moment, we're just going to try to trace those outer walls, and we just did. You need to remember that all these splines are going to have specific two types of vertices. The yellow vertex, which is first vertex, and obviously the vertex which is regular white. That's the element that we're going to take advantage of by adding shell right after we add extrude to our scene. So since we already used extrude for our previous object, we're just going to do the same with this. Notice that it has no thickness. That's why we're adding the shell modifier to it. It's a little bit chunky, but if we go for outer line and make it 15, and by right clicking in this space, I'm making sure that it's set to 0. So again, I'm going to select this line, make sure that the doorway that I previously created is deleted, because we just don't need it. We may now go a little bit inside to this house if we need to, but at this moment it's just unnecessary detail. Remember, when dealing with exteriors, and especially exteriors, you don't want to model anything that you don't need. Since we know that by starting with our line and going from left to right, we are able to go inside with our shell. That's exactly what I'm going to do for this wall inside. So let's just go ahead and create line inside of this object from left to right. So this way we're going to have a little bit more control because this is going now downwards. So it's a quick way to navigate in your splines, and it's also going to save you a lot of time if you understand how the splines actually work. Okay, so now I know it. So many Romanians. Oh, hello. That's good. Poland, India. Wow, London. That's amazing, guys. So nice to see you. Welcome to VizAcademy. And as I said, I'm Mike. We're going to create this beautiful image today. So guys, buckle up and remember that in our YouTube description, you're going to be able to download the same materials that I'm using around here. So you too will be able to create basically the same image. Have you ever worked with 3ds Max? Have you rendered something? Maybe you work in SketchUp and you want to, go level up with your skills. Well, in this case, VizAcademy may be a good choice for you. You can see that all of that, what we're doing right here, is going to be covered in our course. Basically, we're going to go into more detail when we do, but for now, we're just trying to make sure that we can go through this whole modeling process as fast as possible. For the windows, we're not going to use any specific shapes. During our course, I'm going to teach you how to use a lot of very nice tricks like swept modifier for situations like that. But since we're aiming for all of you guys that have no experience with 3ds Max whatsoever, we're going to approach it a little bit in a little bit easier way. So just for the sake of this webinar, we're going to create those windows using only boxes and basic lines. So as you can see, by simply creating this box at the size of our walls, I'm now able to follow all of those elements that we already have in our on our floor plan. So we are going to have to adjust some of those elements, and in a minute I'm going to show you a neat trick that's going to help you out when dealing with objects like that. At this point, we could actually add a little bit extra thickness to this object or just copy it, because it's going to be way back in our image, so it doesn't really require a lot of Is 3ds Max similar to Blender? Yes, it's a 3D software, but 3ds Max is an industry standard. Right now, the Blender people are trying to push Blender a little bit further because, to be honest, it's a fairly good software, but it lacks a lot of plugins and a lot of easy solutions that are already in 3ds Max for years. And since first moment you open your Blender, you're probably going to regret that for a while, because I had a little bit of let's say a crisis when I first started working with 3ds Max, because it can appear to be complicated while Blender is just complicated. I created 15 to 20 renders in Max. That's amazing. So, you can email them to us. We can see what you have created so far. Meanwhile, when we were talking about all of that, we created most of the detail for the window. But obviously, it is going to require a bit more, because you can see that we've got this X shape, plus shape in here. So we're going to go ahead and do that as well. Also, what we can see is that we've got a little bit of extra detail that's holding the roof, so we're just going to use a simple cylinder for that. What is going to be handy when dealing with objects like that is using your regular array method. So we're going to do it in a second. does any of you guys know what array is? It's a simple tool in 3ds Max that allows you to copy as many objects, create as many copies of an object as you wish. So let's go for array, and in this case we're going to try to aim for all of those nice spots in our shot. So let's first preview what we're doing. Since I already know that I'm aligned to my X and Y axis, I know that I need to move it on X-axis, and let's add a little bit to it. So first of all, 250, because I think it's going to be close to the measurement that I need. So 2 and 2.5. I think we're getting close to it, and yes, we're there. So we're just going to add 1 centimeter or 2, just so we're clear, and we are. So now we can decide decide how many copies we want to create. In this case, we're just going to go for 6 because okay, I miscalculated. It's 7. So let's add it in, guys. Are you working in 3ds Max right now and talking to us at the same time? Yes, it's exactly what I'm doing right now. This is not pre-recorded, that's why we're actually working on this, and another proof is our chat. So yes, with 14 years of experience, I'm able to talk and work in 3ds Max and figure out every solution because, well, experience is experience. So let's now create a little bit of extra elements for our glass and for our frames. So first thing I'm going to do is add a line. As you can see, this line is going to be pretty much covering all of this building's frame. We're also going to be able to use this for later when we will be creating our finer details, like for example detail like glass and obviously our floor. But for floor, we're just going to create another shape just because I think it's going to be a little bit faster and you're going to learn a little bit more. Today we're going to also use floor generators. So those of you that have no experience with 3ds Max, don't worry, it's a free plugin that you're going to be able to download from the CG Source website, and I strongly recommend you to get acquainted with that because it's going to be super helpful. It's one of the industry standards that you're going to really enjoy working with. Okay, so now we have all of our glass created. Why have I created this in only one object instead of doing this with multiple objects at the same time? Because it's easier and faster. But we also need to add a little bit extra detail to the frame, as I said. So for now, I'm going to delete this extrude, and just to save a little bit of time, I'm going to delete some of the finer details because we can skip them with a little bit of extra thickness. So that's exactly what we're going to do in a second. So as our model progresses, let's take a quick look at our Instagram. You'll find out that on our Instagram, we post only, and I mean only, our students' work. We don't post my work, we don't post any of our tutor work. It's just 3D renders created by our students, and as I said, most of them are joining our course with zero knowledge of 3ds Max, so it can be your render in just under 7 weeks, because most of our students are able to create their first portfolio shots in 4 weeks. So guys, let's get back to our scene. What we're trying to create now is this frame around here. We're also going to add a little bit of extra detail for this cross element, but it's going to get a little bit more complicated when we are going to simply break this roof into those chunks. You can see that, well, this is not going to be that easy, but obviously it is, because we know what we're doing. So let's continue and let's get back to our main scene now. So since we're already on this level, I think we can actually create this frame. How do we do it? We're going to use extrude again. So extrude is going to be an extremely useful modifier in 3ds Max, mostly because it's going to have its versatile it has a lot of options that you can apply to your models. Okay, so frame is ready. It does appear like it's a little bit chunky because we want it to be that way. It's still going to need to be a little bit higher than 0 because in this case we don't want it to really intersect with our main ground, because when we unhide it right now you can see that, well, this was a little bit too much. But before we get into a little bit more detail and the roof, we need to go ahead and actually create some extra elements around our sorry, this is one of the online perks. Around our exterior. So what we can see now is I'm using the same shape that we had in the beginning, and I'm just deleting this extrude out of it. Remember to create a copy first. Why I did that? It's mostly because we want to create this fine frame around the building. So you can see it on this image, and we want this frame to be exactly as on this floor plan. So how do we do it? How do we approach it? And how do we do it the fastest way? We simply copy those elements. So we already have this vertex and we already have this nice outline, but we still lack one vertex. So let's just use our previously created object and just add one vertex to it, or just move the vertex in such a way. Okay, I think it's going to be in the right position now. Delete this element and you can see that everything is working. We already decided that this building is 300 centimeters and 350 centimeters tall. This is why we're going to make sure to actually create this using our shape. But there's also this one connection that we also need to remember about, and that's when our create line is going to be very, very handy. So let's take a look at this element again. So we need to create a few extra lines. Basically, it's going to be used later on, so let's just do it by clicking on Insert. You can find Insert in your selection, and we can now go ahead and go to Geometry. Here we've got Insert, and we're going to do this break point around here. So this way, it's going to mess up our model a little bit because you can see that it already went to 0. And that's when snapping is going to be a little bit helpful, but you don't have to do it because we already know that the Z value is 350. How you snap to exact position? So to snap to exact position, it's best to set your snap into vertex and midpoint, and this is going to be the best option to do it. Also, if you want to know a little bit more, you can visit our website and ask a few questions. But remember, our full support works between our working hours, and that's from 10 a.m. and 10 p.m. on work week. And remember, it's limited for our students. Options and enable access constraints. So this is going to allow you to quickly work with Snap. I don't really recommend using Snap all the way through your modeling, because most of the time it's going to be a little bit confusing and it may cause you a little bit of problems. Remember that you can stretch out and enlarge all the windows in 3ds Max for your convenience, and that's exactly what I did right now. So just to make those 2 points aligned, I'm going to make sure to put them at the same position. And now we need to create another line around here. So for that, I'm going to not use Insert, but create line again. So that's when another snap is going to be handy, just so we grab those vertices. Remember that you cannot connect more than 2 vertices at the time. You cannot create a cross section. You can only create a continuous shape in 3ds Max. So that's a bummer, but this is how it works. So in this case, we need to make sure that this element is a little bit lower than this element because of our floor plan, and that really helps us. So First of all, we need to put this down a little bit in the z-axis. So here we go, and put that higher, just so we are going to be able to trace it. Sorry for this object, it wasn't supposed to be here. It's a little bit of cheating in this way. So let's hide it and actually use the floor plan as we are supposed to. So as you can see, we're just tracing it. And one thing to point out, this is just a concept art. This is a concept of this house, and the floor plan isn't really that precise. So it's up to you to decide where you want to put your vertices, and some of them are not going to be in the same position. So just bear with me, and we're going to do it as well, as fast as possible and in the best way we can. So let's just make sure to put those vertices where we need them. So in this case, again, we need to put this vertex a little bit higher, so it's going to create this nice roof. Again, remember, this is not a super precise floor plan because it's just a concept art that was created by some company, and we really liked the design, so that's why we're focusing on this image. So how do we now add all of those nice details around here? Obviously, we cannot just go ahead and extrude it, because it's going to take us a little bit of time. That's why we're going to use swept modifier. A swept modifier is super useful, and I hope that you're going to like it as much as I do, because in this case it's going to save us a tremendous amount of time. So you need to understand that there's a lot of shapes that you can use, but also you can use custom shapes for your swept. So in this case, as you can see, it's already set up to work with our exterior. So we're just going to make sure to reposition all the elements by using all the snaps that we need. We don't need to put any offset onto it, because in this case it's just unnecessary. And from what I can see, I still need to flip it. So in this case, we're just going to mirror it, and now it works. Later on, I'm still going to outline it because it's going to help us out, but we still need to make sure that the length and width is set properly. So for that, I'm going to go for as much as 35 by 35, and we're going to add something about 4 centimeters for thickness. If you want to make sure that your object is not rotating because your object is already quite stretched out, you need to make sure that you turn off banking. So this way, the surface of this object is going to remain flat. And this is a very nice hint for those of you that are actually going to follow our webinar, and I strongly advise you do. So we're not yet done with this shape because we want to reuse it a little bit more. So since we already have our main shot almost ready, we need to add all of those bars on the left and right. We need to use this shape because it's going to allow us to actually trace all of the height and width of this object, and we're going to avoid intersecting objects, and also it's going to allow us to get a little bit extra detail as always. So how do we do it? We're just going to use scatter to get a little bit more information about scatter and all the techniques that can be helpful when dealing with it. You may want to visit our YouTube channel. So let's now break those two vertices. So go to editable spline. Remember, I'm now working on the third copy of our outline. So in this case, we're going to break this. Okay, is there an option to change measurements to millimeters? Of course there is. So in this case, you just need to go to unit setup, and here you got the metrics. This is all the details that we're going to teach you during our webinar. How do you get to where you are today? Did you study anything, architecture? That's a great question. Thank you for it. So my story with 3ds Max is quite complicated because I started when I was a youngster. I've had a friend whose father was working as an architect, and well, he had this one license for 3ds Max that he wasn't using it that much because he just didn't know how to do it. Basically, he got it. He got this lifetime license with some kind of package, and well, I installed his 3ds Max on my computer and started fiddling around with it. But back then, when I was starting, 3ds Max was totally different and much more complicated. So the first time I opened it, I basically panicked. I didn't know what I'm doing, and long story short, I didn't go back to 3ds Max for next 2 weeks. Then my friend downloaded a few tutorials for me, and that's when I started learning 3ds Max step by step. But it was a tedious process that really wasted a lot. I wasted a lot of time when trying to do it that way, because I basically went to particle simulation through all the junk that nobody is going to use for architecture. Then I luckily got my first gigs as a freelancer, and I started working with bigger and bigger offices. At some point I started designing some interiors on my own, and well, long story short, this is why I'm here. Thanks to Wojtek and Anthony, I'm able to share my knowledge with you through VizAcademy, and that's pretty much it. So in this case, we're using Scatter. So you can find Scatter at your standard creation panel. Go to Corona as long as you have Corona Render installed, and in Scatter you can just add it in. If you want to learn a little bit more about this specific type of scatter, you can visit our YouTube channel, where we created this specific video on this type of scatter, and just so we have our objects start from this very point, we had to break those scatters around here, and well, quickly and effortlessly we were able to position all of those nice elements around here. Notice that right now we're dealing with a little bit of a mismatch around those two objects. So remember when I told you that we don't need offset right now? This is when we do. So we just need to put this offset just so we accommodate both of those objects, and voila, we're there. Now we need to create the roof for our exterior. Since we're dealing with only one shot, we're not going to go for too many details. We're just going to go for the most necessary elements, and obviously we're not going to go through all of those elements that are not needed in here. I'm from India. Can you tell us about configuration? What you are using for 3ds Max? So for 3ds Max, you don't have to really have a powerful computer. A lot of our students start with 8 GB of RAM and fairly, I'm not going to say new, but not yet very old processors. So if your laptop is about 4 years old, it's 4 or 5 years old, it's probably going to be good enough. So 16 gigabytes is recommended by VizAcademy because we're trying to when creating your scenes, you want to keep your polygon count intact. As you can see, I've got already 21 million polygons, but that's a small overestimation, because in this case we're just dealing with very simple scene, and it's all about this ground object and a few extras that we've added in here. Nothing really to pay attention to, but remember, when your scene has more than 5 million of polygons, it's probably going to lag a little bit. So we're still going to reuse this shape, so we're going to create another copy for it. Okay, you snapped exact position. Can you tell us about your system, CPU and GPU? So GPU is not needed for 3ds Max that much, mostly because it's we're using Corona Render, which is basically your day-to-day render engine that works with your CPU. So your processor plays the main violin. Notice that I've created this copy, so just so we can make a little bit more sense out of what I'm doing, I'm going to change the color for this one object, and I'm going to delete some of the parts just so it's going to be a little bit faster for us. And okay, now this shape is going to be used for our roof. But how can we actually do that? Because, well, it doesn't really look like it's a roof right now. First of all, we need to pay attention to the positioning. You can see that now the position really suggests that, well, it's not going to work. So what we can do is either outline it inwards, so we can just press 3, go for outline, and move this a little bit inside, so it's going to look quite like this, and you can see that it really works perfectly. So what I'm going to do now is delete the previously created line. And yes, now you've got two options. Either you can convert this to editable poly and create 2 extra lines, or you can go into more specific mode and use surface. So surface is going to be a little bit an overkill for a shape like that, and that's why I'm going to convert this to editable poly, and just to avoid any stretching, I'm going to connect those 2 elements and those 2 elements. So as you can see, we already have our object nicely broken, but because of the smoothing groups, we cannot really see any geometry on it. So just for your convenience, I'm going to clear this up. So let's select this, clear, and you can now see that all of those triangles are separate and on different angles. Great. Live, thank you. And so if you just joined, I need to tell you that we're creating this image and we're going to do it as fast as possible. Also, guys, remember to visit our website, that's VizAcademy.uk, and check out our beautiful Instagram where we post our students' work. This is one of the most impressive works on our Instagram because it was very, very hard to do, and luckily our student was really able to do it. And you can also see that we're not posting some random images. Those are always with some 3ds Max proof, and also we're trying to get a little bit of shout out for our students because we're really proud of them. So you can see that a lot of those students, like Sandra, created a lot of beautiful images. Also, you can see that in this case, Jordan was able to create some extraordinary exteriors. So guys, just visit our Instagram, and if you want to learn a little bit more about our school, also visit our VizAcademy.uk website. And if you want to learn about our course, well, here it is. So in just under 7 weeks, we're going to be able to make you a professional in 3D graphics. So we've got 2 options, and in this case is interior and interior plus exterior. Both of those options are available to you guys, and right now we've got only 6 seats left. So our course is divided into 7 weeks, and more about it later, because I think we're going to now see what exactly we're creating in our 3ds Max. So this is not one of those draw a line and then the rest of the whole tutorial. We're just going to go step by step through all of those elements. Basically, yes, we're going to cheat a little bit, but we're going to make this fair and square. So in this case, we're now going to do those chunks for our roof, but as you can see, we still need some floor generator on it. So again, we're going to create more copies, and well, that's what we're going to do. Since we already have this nicely outlined, we can simply go ahead and create this shape like that. So what we want to do is basically make sure that our roof starts exactly where this those beams actually end. So let's put this a little bit lower. Okay, I think it's the right position, and yes, I think we're at the right spot. So again, let's cap this. If you want to be a little bit more precise, you can just go ahead and add a little bit extra connections, because right now you can see that those elements are intersecting, and that's really not going to fly when you will be rendering. That's why we're focusing on adding all those lines that we need. So let's just connect this, and now our object appears to be black. It's mostly because some of the lines are really inwards, and we need to flip this object to make sure that we're dealing with well, object that we need. So let's just do it, and you can see that everything works just fine. Now it's nice and colorful. So I'm going to detach this element as a clone, just so we're going to add floor generator to it. As I mentioned previously, floor generator is one of the most used elements of 3ds Max ever, because it's one of the most downloaded plugins ever. So there are others that are cool, but floor generator is going to be most used one. So for this, we're going to go to edit geometry. So edit geometry, detach, and detach as clone. Some of my workflow may appear a little bit random to you, but believe me, I'm working with 14 years of experience, and I'm trying to show you the easiest and fastest way that really allows you to move from one point to another. One object leads to another object, and that's how I try to work, without really wasting time reusing parts and making sure to not really waste any of your effort, because in the end, all you really wish for is to be efficient in your work, to get more clients and do better work. So now we're going to select those 3 elements that I detached. Remember, when we detached this whole chunk, I then detached all 3 objects as a separate object. So we have now 3 elements selected. I'm adding 1 floor generator to all of them. And unfortunately, floor generator is going to start from a very peculiar position. So we're going to just use our direction to change it. So in this case, you may want to be a little bit more precise, because once you use this, you're going to probably get a little bit too far. So if you want to be more precise with your scrolling, you can press Alt and hold it. Since I added my floor generator to all of the objects at the same time, I have to right click on this and make unique. So why did I add all of this floor generator to all of my objects at the same time and now making it unique? To make sure that all of my length and width is the same on all of the objects. So again, it saves it a little bit of time. So let's now make sure that this object is also properly rotated. So if you hold Control, you're going to sped up the process. In this case, I think we need something around 57 degrees, so it's good enough, and let's now move on. Remember guys, you don't want your atomic precision to take away anything from your workflow. So let's now make this unique as well, because this one was changing, and let's now make this 90 degrees. So fast and easy, we created this floor generator. Thanks to flipping this object earlier, we made sure that all of this floor generator objects, all of those floor generator objects are actually facing downwards. So this is another hint for you guys. So let's now change this object's color to something else. Let's take this yellowy color, so it's going to resemble our planks, and let's see what exactly we have in our viewport right now. Talking the 3D ArcViz course was the best decision worth every... Oh, Brina, thank you. That's really nice of you. Greatly appreciated. Really, thank you. Whoa, that is really amazing details on editable poly. Is it details? We haven't really got into editable poly details yet. We're trying to make sure to avoid unnecessary details. But take a look at this. Now I'm going to go for full in this in our scatter, just so it's going to appear like we have all of the objects in the same spot. We're going to put them a little bit up so they touch this element, and we basically created most of our exterior already. But what next? We need to add more detail, more and more. So as I said, we're going to reuse this part, and that's when this element is going to come in handy. I think we actually could go a little bit more dramatic on this edge around here, because right now we're lacking a little bit of extra detail with this window. So probably I'm going to just put this a little bit lower, So let's select this, deselect that, and let's put this a little bit lower. So as you can see, we're actually intersecting this roof right now. So this was a small mistake, but obviously it's not going to be a problem. Why? Because we're just doing a 3D render, and in reality it's one of the perks of going online. So excuse me about that. So as I said, we're going to reuse this part and we're going to do it right now. So what I'm going to do, because we already used this line and extrude, and you know that extrude is going to extrude basically upwards. So thanks to that, we're able to create this nice line around here, put it there. And now, since we don't need this fine detail, okay, it's at the back. So let's just delete those lines and make sure that this line is connected around here. So let's just make it appear. So we just want to see a hint of it. And here we've got this breaking point and we need to create it on our own. So for that, I'm going to divide this line and just move this a little bit. So again, let's put it exactly at this division. Put it down, so it's going to be at this spot, and we need to focus on the vertices at the front. Yes, at some point it's going to be a little bit confusing. That's why I'm going to hide this window so it doesn't really obstruct our view. So in this case, let's again select this part. And as you can see, it's already positioned quite well, but I still cannot really see a lot. So what we can do is go back to the line, go here and show end results, toggle it on and off. And in this case, I'm just going to toggle it on, go for shell. And this way I can now move my object up and down and see precisely what I'm doing. So in this case, I just want a hint of it. So just 5 centimeters is going to be enough. So let's do it for both of the sides and it's going to look perfect, I promise you. So again, we're going to do the same around here, and we've got a little bit of a mess around here because of the extra vertex around here. So again, deleted. And as you can see, everything is working just fine. So let's move this a little bit up so you can see that this straight line is working just perfectly. We could break it a little bit more because of this angles around here, but it's basically unnecessary. It's a detail that nobody is going to notice, and from the angle of our camera we're not going to pay attention to it. Remember, you want to be as precise as possible, but you also want to avoid getting into too much detail without being sloppy. So let's now put this down a little bit. So again, we're just being a little bit more precise, and in this case we've got our exterior almost done. We now need to put all the interiors floor, and pretty much we're going to be done at that point. So let's select the walls and our outline, and in this case I'm just going to do a quick outline with line itself. So again, we're just going to trace it, but even if those objects are going to intersect a little bit, you may have to think about it a little bit ahead, because we want to make sure that our floor object is going to have only 1 centimeter of thickness. So in this case, even if it's going to be a little bit too big, it's still not going to be bigger than the frame of the window, because the frame of the window is a little bit thicker. So guys, if you want to learn the most efficient way to work in 3ds Max, Beatrice, thank you. Again, that's our student, and I promise we just asked them to give us a little bit of support, and thank you for this. This was very well. Thank you, really, thank you. Is it possible to see the preview? Of course we can. So this is going to be our final shot, and basically what we're trying to achieve now is this effect, because we're first going to rush as fast as possible to our white render position. So obviously it's going to take us a while, and just for those of you that thought that we're going to create this tree, yes we are, but we're going to use a ready model, because creating foliage like that is going to take you a lot of unnecessary time, and in this case we're not going to force you to waste any of it. So since our outline is done, we can now go ahead and add another floor generator to our object. Obviously, it's going to have the previous settings from our endeavor with our roof. So all you need to do is make sure to go for direction and clear it up. If you need to have your planks the other way, just type in 90. It's well, up to you. So now almost all of our mesh is done. We just need a little bit of floor generator around here. So no more editing walls. So let's convert this to editable poly. Select this part here, and now we're going to just detach it as we did the last time. Detach as clone, because we want to have some kind of object behind this object as well. You can see now that if I change the color for it, it's going to be pretty much intersecting with this object behind it, so we cannot really see it. That's why we're just going to make sure to add a floor generator, and always make sure to add at least a little bit of extrusion to it. For this finer detail, we're going to also add this bevel. Floor generator works only on flat objects. Yes, that's definitely one thing you need to remember. A floor generator is only going to work on flat objects, but is it really going to only work with that? Maybe not, because there's a lot of options to really take advantage of floor generator. So for example, if we go ahead and create any kind of planar object, we can still add floor generator and then use any other modifier that we need. So for example, bend. If we want to use it on any other specific type of wood, or just create a barrel, it's going to be easy. So in this case, we're going to do a 360. And you can see that we didn't really need to worry about it. There are lots of ways on how to add your planks to different shapes, different objects, and we are going to teach you all of that during our course. But of course, it's all about this exterior right now. So I think everything here is done for our outside view, but we kind of wish to have this pool around here, right? So now let's get into it. How do we do a pool like that? First, just to save a little bit of time, I'm going to copy this object, because obviously we know how to add a floor generator to an object like that. So Alt X to make this transparent, and we're just going to position this object. No need to really show you again how I do one floor generator. So just do a line and outline it, and then you're done. But what I want to show you is how to add a detail for your pool. And since it's going to be a little bit tricky, because we want to add this nice frame that you can also see on our preview. So let's again take a look at our reference image. So in this case, on our floor plans, you can see that there's some kind of mysterious outline, and we want to really use it as well. So let's take a second to open our render. And you can see that there's some kind of outline that we want to work with. Also, there's a big crater around here that we also want to work with. So let's just take a moment, and well, creating that is going to be a little bit time consuming. You can even see the curvature. So how do we do that? In a second, I'm going to explain everything. Decrease the quality. Okay, thank you. Floor generator, hello. Why doing 3ds Max model? Most of the program like Revit, ArchiCAD, and Rhino have an option to and more easy just to import. Yes, you may want to work with Revit, but in most of the cases, Revit is going to limit your artistic freedom, and Revit is going to really require you to be super precise about everything, and we're all about efficiency. We want you to be able to sell your ideas to your clients, to your teachers, to everybody else, and that's why we're using 3ds Max for modeling. yes, you could use Revit, but you would waste a tremendous amount of time that you're never going to get back. Yes, there are ways to save a little bit of time when dealing with Revit, but believe me, transporting your Revit model to 3ds Max and then redoing it in 3ds Max for the 3D ArcViz is going to waste lots and lots more time. And remember, we're doing visuals not for the final product, we're doing visuals for the concept. So if you're going to waste time in Revit for the concept, well, I've got bad news for you, buddy. So yes, for this curvature, we can simply just create a box, and in this case, this is exactly what I did. So this box around here is going to be extruded inwards, but we don't need any topology for it because it's just going to be covered with one texture and a little bit of extra oomph. So what about this object? Again, we're going to do exactly the same thing, and just to show you that this curvature is going to be nice and precise, we're going to make this as curvy as possible by making sure to scale it down. As you can see, by creating this object exactly on 0, I was able to start my sphere exactly in the middle. This is going to be a small cheat sheet for you guys, because this is going to save you time, and saving time is something you want to do, especially with your clients. I need to know your CPU, Ryzen or Intel. I'm all about AMD right now because Intel was, their offer is not that good at this moment compared to AMD's, but my pick was solely based on the performance and price per core per dollar. So I'm using Ryzen Threadripper 2970. So that's my setup. As you can see, we've went to our geometry, so the creation panel, geometry, compound objects, Pro Boolean, and what I did here is just a simple Boolean. So let's again take a look at this, and okay and okay. But before I do that, I want to copy this object again because I'm going to reuse this part. So let's just start picking 1, 2, and done. Extrude, delete, and we're going to do the frame I mentioned before. So let's just put this on 0. Let's make sure that this object's pivot is on 0 as well. So guys, and now we're just adding another swept modifier into it. So we don't need any of the offset. So let's just make sure to clear it out. A little bit of a bar, and we now have this frame. You can control the width and the height of your frame just by simply changing those two values, and this is exactly what we're going to do. And because this object is going to allow us to work with a lot of interesting options, we're just going to add chamfer to it because we want this to be nice and round. So let's add a few of segments. So since this object is going to be at front of our camera, we want it to have nice and round edges, not too shabby, but yeah, you know what I mean. So in this case, you can see that we've got a little bit weird topology. Ignore it, it's okay, because 3ds Max allows this. If you want to be 100% precise about it, you can just turn off this minimum angle option, but believe me, it's not going to really do a lot for you. So now we're going to create water. We still could use the same shape, and that's exactly what I'm doing. So copy, chamfer off, swap off, delete, and we're going to convert this to editable poly, move this a little bit lower so it's going to be beneath our surface. Okay, so this is our surface now, and let's put it down. You can go a little bit lower than your walls, it's okay. You can even create a little bit bigger object. Cap it, so it's a box in here. Just make sure that the box is capped, it doesn't have any openings, because later on when we will be adding a little bit of absorption to it, it's going to work better with the water. Also make sure that it's not flipped, so if it's dark red, it's going to work a little bit differently. So pay attention to those two details. And now let's change the color to blue, so it's just going to look like we really did that. Guys, everybody knows how to create a 3. If you are a beginner, it's basically going to be a quick tutorial for you. Google 3D model 3 download, and there's a lot of packages for it, but obviously I'm going to show you exactly how to do it once you join our course. But in this case, I'm just going to use a model that I downloaded earlier, and we're just going to reposition it. As you can see, we're not doing a lot to this 3, we're just positioning it. And if you want to give it a little bit finer, more dramatic look, you can always go for 3x3 or 4x4 modifier and just edit it to your own needs. In this case, I'm just going to make it a little bit taller, and I don't want to stretch the bottom half of it. So I'm just going to make sure that this 3 is dramatic enough for my shot. So now this looks quite promising, so we can do first preview render, but we still need a lot of objects around our scene. So let's do a quick preview and let's start our interactive render. Guys, it's really amazing course tutorial. Okay, thank you, Anup. Hey guys, I need okay, great. I can see that even friends are meeting on our webinars. That's so cool. So this is how our 3 actually looks like. So let's release this camera and see our main preview. As you can see, it's well, it's looking quite good. Now we have created our material override. By simply clearing this up, we can now go back to our previous colors, but those are not the colors we want to work on. So Corona material, and this is how you do the override. So F10, go to scene, add material override, and this is it. For our sky, we're using Corona Sky, just a simple Corona Sky. So in this case, this is the most realistic way of doing it, and this is exactly what we're going to do. So Corona Sky it is. As you can see, everything is working just fine. So this is the moment where we can add a little bit of furniture around our scene. Yes, you can try doing it by simply downloading some furniture, or you can model it out on your own. It's all up to you, but I strongly recommend you to not spend too much time on modeling furniture. That's why we're going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to go to the scene and copy this exact object from the scene. More information about this amazing plugin again is going to be shared with you during our course. And now from one scene to another, I'm going to be able to just copy this object. Always remember to turn off your rendering when copying objects into your scene, because it may crash your 3ds Max. I don't want to override any materials. I want to use the scene materials that we already have. So use scene material. Will you show us how to make water? Yes, I will. In just a second, we're going to jump into that. So as you can see, the furniture is already here. We still can transplant some of the objects from the inside. Let's just go ahead and delete the roof from our previous scene. We're not going to use it anyway, so let's just copy this. As you can see, again, it's an object with a few floor generators, so not really going to go into that, because as you know, it's just going to be a waste of time to tell you how to create a cylinder in a box with a floor generator. So now we can put it here. It's probably in the right position. It all depends on your personal taste if you want to show this element or not. So if you want, you can make it higher or lower. It's all up to you. So now we've got our model almost ready, but for now we're going to hide those elements that we don't need. So it's our floor plan. We're going to add a little bit of secret sauce to it. Let's just put it in. So this is one of the elements that we're going to be able to show you during our course. So let's get into it in a second. But guys, what we're going to create now is the ground and our scatters. So scatters are basically going to be very, very important for us. If you want to get the same asset, the rock that you can see here, so let's again take a look at the image. So let's do a full screen. You can see this beautiful rock, and it was downloaded from Megascans. For those of you that don't know Megascans, this is a website that allows you to download, buy, or even, I guess, no, they do not share. So you can buy your beautiful assets there. So this is where I downloaded it. It's free, so you also will be able to follow our steps. And now guys, I'm just going to browse our Instagram a little bit. So I'm going to show you what kind of materials we're going to be creating. So we're going to create material just like this one for our beams, and also we're going to create wooden elements just like those, but with just a little bit of twist. So we're already going to also show you how to do this kind of material, because basically, yes, it's necessary for our scene. So all of those beautiful renders by our students can be downloaded, can be viewed on our Instagram. So just take a look, and if you want to learn a little bit more about our course, just visit VizAcademy.uk, click on course. Remember, only 6 spots are left and 21 days till the start. So it's basically going to probably as soon as we stop, as soon as we get our full group, we're going to start recruiting for the next one. And I have to give you a little bit of a heads up. The price is going up because we're just well, it's just going up. Anyway, a little bit of detail about our course. Let's see what we're going to do. At week first, we're going to teach you how to do basic modeling, and we're going to quickly jump into a more advanced modeling. And if you want to learn all of that, we're just going to go step by step through all of that. Obviously, we're also going to teach you a little bit about more advanced modeling, and then we're going to jump straight into lights and light creation. This is exactly what we're doing right now during our webinar. We're at this level. So we went in under an hour through our 2 weeks of course already. Now the next step is material creation. Materials tend to take a little bit of time, so that's why we're going to spend almost 2 weeks on it. During our course, you're going to learn how to position your camera, how to do all of the shots, and how to do post-production. In week 5, we're starting doing our exteriors. Mostly we're only planning on how to do it, and some of you can already start modeling it. But usually week 5 is reserved for our interiors and finishing it up. So week 6 and week 7 is exactly what we're doing right now, exteriors. So we're going to go from the most basic exteriors to more complicated. Once you finish your first exterior, we're going to be able to jump right into more advanced one. So as you can see, our students are able to create beautiful shots in under 7 weeks, and all of those shots are going to be part of their portfolios. And believe me, this is a very important element of your career, to be able to create all of that. Okay. Do you think, okay, so now let's get into our scene. So since we already know that we're going to create all of those rocks, I'm going to later on show you the source for this specific asset, because obviously it's going to be easy to reproduce, and creating rocks like that is not going to be part of this webinar. It's just an important asset from Megascans. But what we can talk about a little bit is this part here. So this is the scatter. Just for your information, the scatters are basically the main element for our exteriors. We've got a lot of videos on it, and obviously I'm going to show you a lot of applications for it during our course, and basically you're probably going to love it because it's automatic work. So we're going to use two types of assets. So first asset is going to be this small bush with just few strands. It's more of a detail, so we're going to use this. And for our background, we're going to use a little bit larger elements, and we're going to make sure that they are going to basically cover the background. So both of those elements are going to be super important for us. But how do you actually do your ground? How do you add it? How do you work with it? It's very simple. We already shown you how to do it during our modern architecture webinar. So if you want to go for all the details, I can still show you. So guys, do you want to go through this detail or not? If yes, let's just go for it. Are there any special discounts for the course? Currently, the course is discounted, as I mentioned. So the price is going up because, some of our promotions are going to end in just a few weeks, so that's why we're going to increase the price. So if you are going to join the course with a friend or a few friends, you may actually want to email us so we assign the same tutors to you, because as I said, I'm one of the teachers, and basically we're going to make sure that you're going to be able to is it okay to work from Mac? Yes, it is, but you're going to have to bootcamp it. You don't have to do a Hackintosh. You can just do bootcamp. Avoid parallel, because parallel is basically perfect solution for those of you that just need Windows for 5 minutes, but in reality, if you want to work in Windows, you better use bootcamp. So what I did here was a very, very easy setup. So let's just try to reproduce the same thing just for the sake of the webinar. So first of all, we create some planar object just from left to right, nothing specific, just make sure to add a little bit of density to it, just like that. Now, when you do, you want to add a little bit of extra geometry to it, because we need geometry to work with. We want to have a little bit of area to add detail to. So for that, I'm going to go for 400 by 300, and in this case I'm probably a little bit wrong, so we need to go 300 by 400. 3 by 400, okay, and now we've got probably enough detail. So let's convert this to editable poly. Okay. Now, when it's editable poly, as you can see, we first want to get rid of everything that we don't need. So we're going to jump into our main camera. You can see this yellow frame. It's a save frame. Shift F to turn it on. The save frame is going to work with your camera, and it's going to show you what exactly your camera can see. That's why I'm going to just simply select everything that is just a little bit outside my camera and delete it. So I don't need anything that it's not in the spectrum of my camera, because, well, it would be a waste of your RAM. Just so we save a little bit of time, we're also a little bit of RAM, we're deleting that part. So now let's go for it, and let's add a little bit of extra to it. So now, all of you guys that don't have any kind of experience with architecture, 3ds Max, or whatsoever can join our course and learn how to create visuals on your own. We promise you that we're going to be able to teach you how to do that in under 7 weeks. So obviously it's going to require a little bit of hard work on your side, but yes, it's going to be worth it, and I promise you that. So in this case, what you can see, I'm just doing this small changes to curve my ground a little bit, because I want it to be nice and random. So let's just delete this for a second. And how did I really do this randomness on my ground objects. Basically, what you can do is add multiple layers upon layers of noise. So for that, we're going to increase this Z value to something around 250, just to show you how fast it can go. But we obviously don't want this to be that tall, so we're going to go for something around 50 centimeters, and it's enough. But the scale is still a little bit off, so just to make it a little bit more random, we're going to change the scale and add another noise on top of it, but this time it's going to be fractal. So noise, and let's just go for it and just change this size, so now it's going to be nice and random. So let's just go for it and increase the Z value and play around with our noise. And with just 2 layers of noise, we are able to create this ground in seconds. Obviously, when dealing with larger scenes, you're going to have to decide which chunks of elements you want to add detail to and where to save a little bit of space, but it's all up to you. So the same process will apply for this second part, so we don't want to go through it. As I said, it's all online, and we need to make sure that you save a little bit of time with us. Okay, guys, so the main model is done. Everything is in place. If I forgot something, it's probably not that important. We can now play a little bit with the offset. I can see that now it doesn't really look that good, so we can actually fix it, and it's now perfect. So let's do a quick preview of our white render. So thanks to the scatter, we were able to create all of this foliage around our scene. This is the moment where we actually add our sun. When dealing with Corona Sun, you always have to remember that it's trying to mimic the real life. So if your sun is positioned downwards, it's just going under your horizon, it's just not going to work properly. So we want this to be a proper scene with proper physically correct elements. Okay, so we don't need this after all, and now we're going to delete it because we already took all the parts that we needed. Just for the sake of not wasting time of sharing materials, we're just going to do it, UVW, and you can see that both of those materials are already done. So let's now talk about materials in a second, because well, it's going to be worth it, but we're still online, right? So my setup for my sun is 043. Your default values are going to be a little bit different, and what we are trying to achieve is the same angle as this beam around here. So let's just pretend that this is the default, and you know what, let's just create one. Just so you know that we're dealing with the same setup, we've got the default setup around here. We can now go from left to right, and no, we're going to go from right to left, and now position the sun a little bit up. It's up to you to decide how high your sun is going to be, but remember that in this specific scene, we're just trying to mimic this one shadow, so it's going to really look good. Is there any okay, so I feel like I'm not okay with 3ds Max because I used to use SketchUp, but dude, your work is amazing. Okay, thank you very much. This is really nice of you. I promise you that by joining VizAcademy, you're also going to be good, and having a little bit of knowledge about 3D from SketchUp is not going to be anything that's going to stop you. It's going to elevate your work a lot more, because in this case, we're just going to focus on giving you all the details about Corona Render, and obviously about all the techniques that are best to work with in 3ds Max. So let's now use this view again, so you can see that our scene is already done. And now let's quickly try to add a little bit of preview. As I said, our setting is a little bit different to the previous one, so it's going to be a bit different. Since we added sun, and now we can see that it's nice and warm. First thing you want to do is either play with exposure, but just from the professional standpoint, I'm going to tell you that you should not fiddle with exposure too much, because when you are going to get into this bad habit of going too far away with exposure, you're just going to deal with a little bit more noise in your images. So try to stick to 0 as close as possible and fiddle with lights instead, but obviously going outside the spectrum for some values like up to 5, even 8 at some points is okay, but just avoid it if you can. So let's go ahead and decrease the power of our sun, so it's going to be a little bit weaker, but thanks to that, we can now see our shadows a little bit better. At the same time, what we're going to basically focus on is our render itself. So let's just add a little bit extra to it. What can we do? I think that I want to see a little bit more light in here. So for that, I think by going a little bit higher with our sun, we're going to be able to achieve that. But it's a precise type of eyeballing it, and obviously when dealing with your clients, you may want to go for a specific date and time and position your sun like that. It's one of the perks I'm going to show you during the exteriors, guys. So those of you that are already our students, just remind me to show you that. Okay, so now the size of your sun is going to be responsible for the softness of your shadows. So since we don't want the shadows to be too soft, we're just going to increase it a little bit because we don't want this to be a perfect weather. Okay, guys, we're almost done. Now we're almost starting our materials, but before we do, we're going to work with a little bit of environment. So without any further ado, we're just going to go ahead and show you exactly how we do environment. Environment can be tricky, and it requires a little bit of planning. So let's just use the best methods for it. Okay, first thing you do is click on render setup and make sure that oh, hello Attila, nice to see you here. Could you please show us an example between a concept and final product? Obviously yes, but I wasn't prepared for this question. Yes, I can. Guys, could you please send me the apartment from the Warsaw Zlota 44? So that would be very handy. So wait a sec, I'm just trying to get the materials for you. Okay, now let's continue. So we're going to use a direct visibility override. In this case, it's going to be very easy to do so because we're just going to basically use one image at the time. So how do we do it? How do we add this material override? It's very simple. You go to F10, render setup, go to scene, and go to scene environment tab. Okay, now we're just going to go to direct visibility override, and we're going to use this map. So this map is not yet plugged in, so we're going to have to look for it. How do we do it? We just simply have to prepare for it a little bit earlier, and we have to have it on our computer. So what I'm going to use as our background is this image. You can see that I already fiddled with it in Photoshop, so don't mind this. It's just for the sake of a little bit of time saving. Let's just now add this background. Okay, so let's open it up and wait a second. Okay, so wait a sec. So here we have a nice example of render before and after. So it's unfortunately daylight versus nightlight. So you can see that the similarity is there. So obviously you want to make sure to get rid of your Wait a sec, maybe I have more photos. Unfortunately, no. So next time I'm going to be prepared, because this is a perfect question to show you why you should do your visuals. And have I saved yet? No, I'm just going on bareback, but that's a good idea to save for once. 3ds Max tends to be one of those programs that like to crash from time to time, but obviously it's not going to be a big deal, because in most of the cases you've got autosave, and if you are more reasonable than I am, you probably are saving on the way. So we now need to add our materials, since our light is already done. Since a lot of you asked for it, we're going to start from the pool, and the water is basically very simple. Oh snap, I got carried away with the questions. Hey Attila, thank you. Let's go for this override. Not showing you details because, again, saving time, but let's just put it here. And this whole chain is Corona bitmap, Corona color correction, Corona tone map. So this is one of the elements that you need to remember about, but now we're going to add our maps. So for that, I'm just going to grab this file and put it in. Always, and I mean always, try to use a background from your sources and use Corona bitmap instead of a regular bitmap, because it tends to crash your Macs. So thanks you for the heads up. I always love when you explain lights and the textures, Mike. Thank you, that's super cool. So this background is now desaturated. That's by design. So we're just going to make sure to take this away, and now we have our background partially desaturated. We need to add a little bit of gamma, so it's going to be nice and bright, and as you can see, it's now working quite well, but it's not yet there. We're just going to add a little bit to it in a second, because now we need our materials. So this is our rushed white background, white materials setup. So this is pretty much what we were trying to achieve as fast as possible. I think I could use a little bit more scatters around here, but still it's going to be okay. So for the materials part, we're going to jump straight into the ready scene, because that's where the magic really happened. So I'm just to save your time, we're going to go through the materials, and obviously we first need to create our pool. So for that, as you can see, we've got this beautiful material that we created earlier, and we're going to go through this together. The one thing you need to remember is that IOR for water in this case is going to be 1.33. It's very important, so your caustics are going to look good. Also, don't go too high with your Fresnel in reflection, and you basically want to just get rid of your diffuse color, because it's just not needed in this case. And well, basically this is the setup, but you also want to have the distance. This is where you want to decide if you want to go with green, blue, red, yellow, whatever. It's all up to you to decide what kind of water you want to have in your pool, but this is the one element that helps you get the nice effect on your water. Noise. Noise is going to be added into bump, and remember that by changing your bump power, you decide how strong your waves are going to be. So with this very basic setup, let's just add our first material to our scene, and let's render it. But before we get rid of our material override, let's just render it, start interactive, and let's see how it actually looks like. So as I said, with this super basic setup, we were able to really do a lot. And thanks to the absorption that I mentioned to you earlier, we are actually going to get really nice and realistic effects, because you can actually see that the objects that are submerged in this are actually creating some nice effects, and we can actually trace them down. So let's just, okay, I need to use this viewport. So you can see that this object is slowly but gradually getting a little bit more wet and a little bit more submerged. So yes, it's important for us to add some kind of absorption. So the precise and accurate details about setup of this material is going to be shared during our course. So guys, again, if you want to learn a little bit more about our course and our 7 weeks training, just visit www.VizAcademy.uk and see for yourself how easy it is to become a professional. And yes, you're going to be able to create those in just a few hours. So guys, now you can see that I've added this extra element in here so people can actually sit on this at this pool. It's one of the details that was already there, so why not just add it in since we're working on it. Okay guys, this is it for this scene, and we're going to jump into our second scene and we're going to explore all the materials there, so we can actually see what exactly we're doing. So you know what, I think we can actually stick around with this scene because we've created all of this, and why just leave it? So let's explore this material for this beam. So what exactly that it is. First of all, let's create a new viewport and let's just talk about this material. So what we're dealing with is a really easy bitmap. A little bit of Corona UVW randomizer is set to those nice options, but in reality you want to set it from -1 to -1, and what it does, it basically allows you to move the UVW box, which looks like this, and UVW box is going to allow you to set up your mapping for the objects to your needs. So in this case, as I said, we're just going to make sure that we fit all the needs of our object. So let's just randomize it a little bit. So 150, no, you know what, 3 and 300. Okay, this looks perfect. Now, what we need to do about it? We want to randomize this texture because obviously creating those beams and changing the texture for each and every element would be a little bit of a tedious work. And that's why we're going to make sure that we're going to deal with just one texture, and it's going to be randomized left and right and up and down. For best to use seamless texture in this case, so we're just going to use one of the textures that's going to be shared with all of our students in our VizAcademy material library. Did I mention that we share materials, models, and lots more with our students? Because we really want you to learn something, and we don't just let you out empty-handed. We make sure that you use all of our assets to create professional work just as we do. So for now, I'm going to make sure that all of those objects in here are excluded from our scatter. Plans like that are part of our course, and obviously we're also going to talk about the materials briefly, but in this case, those are ready materials that we are not going to explore. For this specific stone, it's one of the assets downloaded that I mentioned earlier, is from Megascans. So let's actually see how you can use those objects. So again, it's a very simple setup. In this case, we're just dealing with one very important element, and that's diffuse. On top of that, we're adding a normal map set with bump to 1. Okay, hi. I don't know your language, it's probably Russian, right? So if you could translate it to English, I'm going to greatly appreciate it. But привет, do you also teach animation? Only by request. This is not the most important part of our course, but yes, we're going to go through it on the next webinar with our class. So as I mentioned, we're already we're already in the middle of our next group, so the group is going to get a little bit more information on that very soon. So that's a good question, and it's right on time. So as you can see, we are already quite far into our model. Now I want to make sure that my scatters are in the right position, so let's just move some of those outlines up, so we're going to get a bit more scatter in here, so it's going to be nice, and well, it's really nice. And now let's do the same for the opposite side. Okay, so a little bit up, so we're going to have a little bit more scatter, more visible, more outside this ground, and you can see that now it's there. Still, we need to exclude this object, so the ground object, remember guys, Corona comes with material library, and you can use that at your will. But we created this very simple ground just from one texture, Corona color correction, with no reflection, to save a little bit of time when rendering, because this is just the background, and we want you and your viewer to focus mainly on our shot. So okay, that's actually a nice request. Maybe we will. This ground is a little bit too bright, so let's make it darker by using Corona Color Correct. And thanks to the fact that we already are 80% done, we're only going to add the most basic materials to our scene, and then we're going to go to more exciting element in Photoshop. So all the beams are there, all the elements are there. We still want to get rid of the override on our tree, so let's do it right away. Okay, now let's get into more interior materials. So since the exterior is done, we're only going to do what I said, and that's a little bit lower gamma for the ground, a little bit less saturation. Maybe I overdid the gamma. Okay, it looks perfect. It's nice and desaturated. That's what I love about it. And we're soon going to make sure that all the elements are working together. So maybe I'm going to also rotate this rock a little bit, so it's going to look a little bit more like it's being hit by the sun. So obviously it's all up to you to decide what kind of environment you want to create. It's all up to you to decide what kind of elements you want to use there. And obviously it's all going to work together if you follow our lead. So now I think it looks better. So let's continue and let's add a little bit more to our scene. Since we're going to do the materials for the beams, we're going to basically select it first and make sure to get rid of the material override out of it. And you know what? At this point, we're just going to add the very easy materials that we know. So in previous webinars that we showed, we went through those materials, and this is exactly the same thing. So detail, metal, you already know it, and let's add it in. So how do we do it? All the metals are going to require some kind of very delicate diffuse, but they're only going to mostly rely on your reflection. So by adding this reflection glossiness map in here, we're going to get really decent effects. So we still need some kind of mapping, and for mapping we're just going to go for UVW map. You know what? I selected this roof instead of our beams, so that's a bummer. We're going to rechange the material in a second, but the beams are there. So let's add the material, and it's there. I obviously not into this game, but it looks good how I learned it. It's not an architect university, and it's not a game. It's 3ds Max, and it's professional software. So if you want to learn how to create images like that, visit our website and we're going to show you exactly how to do it. So guys, we're just going to now create a little bit more materials for our scene. And again, guys, I think it's a good moment to actually get rid of the material override and see how weird it is going to look like. So let's start interactive. just as I said, and a lot of weird materials. So especially for the ground and for the pool around here, it looks weird, and all of those weird elements. So let's now add material for our glass. I think the glass is going to be really easy because in this case, we're just going to use glass thin. How to set up glass? It's basically the same setup as for your water, but we're going to leave those values as default because we're just going to click on our thin, and that's it. This is basically how we do our glass, and you can see that it looks perfect. Obviously, with all the environment being not yet done, it doesn't really fly, but let's make sure to add all the materials. So without really rendering, let's now talk a little bit about VizAcademy. So guys, if you want to learn how to create 3D renders just like those in my portfolio or portfolio of our students, which is more important because this is the best proof of not my skill but your skill, guys. And by taking our course, in under 7 weeks you're going to be able to create your images just like this. And yes, all of those are created in 3ds Max with our help. The help is basically our guidance, because VizAcademy doesn't own, it's not just your next regular course, generic in its nature. What we try to really do for you guys is make sure that the course is going to teach you something. This is basically the best way to learn 3D rendering in 3ds Max in under 7 weeks. We have 2 packages, interiors and exteriors with interiors. So first we go through modeling, then lighting, materials, post-production, and a little bit of insider knowledge. On top of all of that, you get unlimited support in our working hours. So basically you get support every day, and basically it's the most valuable thing. Remember, you also get your own individual task. So you may really think, well, why do they have so many beautiful images? Because we do not limit our students. We have this policy where if you ask a question, we will answer it. And basically, this is all the result of it. When you will join our course, you will be able to pick what kind of style, what kind of interior, exterior, or just an image you want to work on, because, well, basically, this is what you want to learn. You want to learn how to do stuff. Okay, guys, obviously no game. I will do, thanks. Okay. Okay, thank you. Why you never use HDRIs? I do not use HDRIs because those are unpredictable. Yes, you can have 5 or 6 of those HDRIs, and basically you're going to end up with hundreds of renders that look the same. And working with HDRIs is good, and I do recommend it from time to time. But in reality, when dealing with larger scenes and you want to always have one element which is super important for your professional job, predictable results. And HDRIs are not predictable for exteriors. In interiors, you may control it and you may actually ignore some of the downsides of HDRIs, but for exteriors, it's super important to have predictable results and be in control, because your client may really love everything about the image, but he wants to move the shadow a little bit. What then? Your HDRI is set, fixed, and you cannot really change anything. And when moving your HDRI around, it's basically going to ruin your light altogether. So this is why I don't use HDRIs for exteriors. I try to avoid it, mostly because of unpredictability. So for our ground and the main object for our base, we're going to use 1,200 centimeters for this whole object. What is going to be important for us in this case is to add a concrete material. All of this material could be summarized to those two textures. So one of the textures is our main texture itself, and the background, or let's say backup texture, that's going to pretend to be the dirt. Here we only have a little bit of mixing and a little bit of changes, and it's not super important, obviously. So what we are dealing with here is a little bit darker material just for the detail, and a little bit of distance for the dirt. So let's just add it into our object, and in this case I think we don't have the reflection glossiness, so I'm just going to recreate it in a second. So let's just add it in, reflection glossiness, Corona color correct. Obviously, you want to have some reflection on an object like that, because concrete really looks beautiful when it shines. So you have to take that in account. Just for the sake of this webinar, I'm putting quite random values, because in this case, what we're doing is making sure that our gamma and our reflection is going to be quite contrasty, so we get nice black and white image. And obviously, we want to make sure that our reflection on this object is going to be nice and strong. So usually our webinars are going to take from 1 hour up to 3 hours. So each webinar is going to be packed with reviews of your current work, and obviously with we always show you something new and answer all the questions that are asked during the webinar. We also go outside, a little bit outside of our course, to talk about everything that our students may be interested in, and if we found some new hints or something that can help them on their work in the future, we also share that. So now we're going to add this main material to all of the walls inside of this object, just to save a little bit of time. And obviously we need to make sure that our frames and our windows are nice and black. So guys, this is almost finished. White material doesn't really need explanation. Let's delete all of this because it's getting a little bit crowded around here. Remember that once you add your material to your object, deleting it from your view doesn't delete it from your scene. Autosave, let's take a moment to once again glance over our Instagram. I'm talking about it like it's a golden element of our course, because it is. It's all thanks to you guys. We're able to post all of this well, amazing work. I don't have any other words for it. You can find a few tutorials and few useful links on our dailies, so remember to follow us on Instagram. So that's VizAcademy UK. Thank you, Leah. That's super cool. Nice to see you. Leah is one of my first students, and it was some time ago. So thank you for visiting. What do you prefer for exterior lighting, HDRI or Corona Sky? Corona Sky all the way. By the way, we had HDRIs on the course in interiors. Oh yeah. That's part of it. So I probably should have mentioned that. Thanks, Mary. Okay guys, so we're getting a little bit closer to finish, so let's now create some wood and some materials for our floor generated objects. So obviously we're not going to go into too much detail again, because we just want to do it as fast as possible. So what we're going to do exactly is use a material like that. So we're going to use Corona multi-texture map for our scene. So how it works, you just load your textures that are supposed to be prefabricated and split into chunks, perfect for such scenes. So for that, I'm just going to make sure to find all of my JPEGs now, because it seems like they are missing in this scene. So the floor generated objects are always going to come with a little bit of mapping from at the default. So you want to make sure to use this to your advantage. Most of the time, you're going to experience a lot of interesting phenomenons when trying to create materials, and that's when our course is actually going to get useful for you, because as I said, we are trying to get as predictable results as possible. We're making sure that when you once create an exterior, you can reuse the knowledge for your next work, for your next interior or exterior. You know what, I'm going to cheat a little bit, and we're just going to grab those materials from this scene, or just, you know what, we're going to explore them in here, because I think those two scenes are almost identical, and since I am missing that texture for some reason, we're just going to see what exactly we're dealing with. So in this case, it's also going to be one of those situations. So give me a moment, guys. I'm actually going to look for those textures, and guys, there's a lot of you online. Tell me, guys, where you're from. I would really love to see now how our demographic changed, and obviously, if that's not too much to ask, tell me what you do for a living. Are you students? Are you already professionals? Do you know 3ds Max at all? And would you like to learn how to create beautiful images? If yes, please visit our website. So I really want to know who's watching us, just for well, it's going to be really interesting to know. Okay, I think I found a good parquet, so this is going to be one of the textures we're going to use, but obviously we can keep exploring a little bit to see if we find anything better. In this case, you know what, this texture is just perfect, so let's get into it and basically go back to our scene. So as I was saying, we're going to deal with multi-texture, and that's why we're going to use this batch load textures. Okay, this is really good to see that those textures were all the time there. So just a little bit of surprise. So do you use do you have some free textures to play with? For our students, obviously, yes. But if you want to get free textures, go ahead and visit www.HDRI Heaven and Texture Heaven. Those guys are going to help you out. This is a beautiful website, so I strongly recommend you to do it. I mean, do it as visited. So we're going to create two materials, one for those desaturated planks and one for the planks inside, more lifelike. So in this case, we're using Corona Multimap, which is a huge element of our course with a little bit of extra gamma randomization, so it's going to be nice and random when we add it in. For all the objects outside of our scene, so the planks that are obviously going to be exposed to the light, sunlight, we're going to add another desaturated material at the same nature. So we almost have all the materials, but we still need to do the frames that I started but never finished. So let's just do all the frames, all of those elements at the same time. Control Shift A to select similar. When we have selected all the similar objects, so you want to make sure that no object that you don't need is unselected, so unhide all again, and let's make sure to select all of those elements that we need. So obviously it's going to be a little bit of manual work at this point, because usually when you deal with scenes like that, you have to use layers, and as you can see, I'm not using them because we're trying to do it as fast as possible, but I strongly recommend you to use them as many times as possible. Brazil, wow, this is good. Thank you, that's super cool. Austria, that's super cool. Working with Maya, so if you are a student, please consider changing to 3ds Max, depending on what you do, obviously, because Maya is better for animation and design of that type. So if you want to create animation, go for Maya, but if you want to go for architecture and beautiful images, I would strongly recommend you Corona, because 3ds Max and Corona. Okay, guys. Now I think we've got all the materials in our scene ready. So let's start our render in a second. Guys, I just want to show you once more our Instagram, and in a second I'm going to tell you how to enroll to our course. But first, let's hit our render. I hope that we're not going to need to add any changes to it. At this point, I'm going to hide some of the objects that we don't need. This is our main scene, so let's just make sure that everything works. And if it doesn't, we're just going to simply fix it and make it work. Okay, so Alt X on this one, just so it looks like water. Okay, in just under 2 hours. This is a very good time. Guys, we were able to create this beautiful image together and online with you in under 2 hours, and everything is there. So let's compare this. Let's take this to Photoshop in a second and add a little bit to it. And meanwhile, while it's rendering, I'm going to quickly talk a little bit about VizAcademy online course. You already know who our teachers are. So I'm Mike, and you may want to see my work on Behance. Also, Tony is our second main teacher, and we also have Wojtek and Tony are our founders, and currently Anne is working as our secondary tutor. With this team, guys, we're trying to deliver the best course that we can come up with, and believe me, there's really no comparison to others, because this is not next generic course. This is a course that really teaches you how to become a professional in under 7 weeks. If you feel a little bit intimidated because this whole webinar was quite highly paced, I know it's a little bit rushed, but this is because we're online. And in reality, when you will be working on your interior, exterior, you will have all the time in the world to complete it. What is very important is that you will be able to work on all the assignments from the comfort of your own home. With our support, you're going to be able to follow all the tasks and all the homeworks that you're going to be assigned. With all that, you'll get I'm not sure actually how many hours, but tens of hours of video footage that's going to be able to show to help you understand 3ds Max a little bit better. To be honest, it's approximately 40 hours, but since we're constantly recording new stuff and making sure that everything that everything is there, we're just constantly improving our course. So if you want to sign up to it, just go to VizAcademy.uk, read a little bit about our course, and remember that soon we're going to, this was updated. So probably the date was a little bit wrong earlier. So if you want to learn a little bit more about our course, visit our website, read through all of the elements that you're going to achieve, and remember, the most important element here is that you're going to leave our course with best quality portfolio, and that's a promise. So now if you want to enroll, all you need to do is go to enroll. Begin your journey, enroll with 3ds Max VizAcademy. So guys, first you type in your name, so Mike, my surname, and you can also type in your email. So our email is info.vizacademy.uk. You obviously should provide your own email in this case, and then you can choose what option you're interested in. So currently we're recruiting people for the 9th of July, and this is when our enrollment ends. But it's also important to add that as soon as we get enough students into our class, we're going to close the enrollment, and we're going to start recruiting for the next group, which is going to be in approximately 2 or 3 months from this point in time. So you may want to actually consider it. We also have this two options, so 5 weeks for only interiors and 7 weeks for only interiors plus exteriors. So this is the best seller in our course, so this is what I'm going to choose for you guys, and then you tell us us a little bit about yourself. So tell us if you've worked in 3ds Max or not, and if you have any comments, expectations, or you want to say something to us, just add it in. So in this case, you can see that we can now choose what country you come from. So obviously you can pick whichever country you come from, and in this case we're going to go for Great Britain as soon as we find it on this list. You know what, I misclicked. Okay, so let's go for United Kingdom, city London, country, okay, UK, and here you just tell us who you are. So it's going to be very good for us to understand who you are, what are your expectations, why you join our course. And we treat all of our students individually. That's super important to remember, that we treat you individually. You talk to your during our support hours, you are able to talk to your tutors via chat, and we're going to be able to basically solve all of your problems with 3D. So type in your age, and once you do, you want to go for this, how did you learn about VizAcademy? Obviously, you want to learn from, you may want to learn about VizAcademy from Facebook, Instagram. So whichever is true in your case, just pick it. Just click on this form and you can submit. Okay, let's just type something in. And once you submit this form, you will receive a few emails how to really conduct yourself in the next steps and how to prepare for our course. You will also be sent a few extra emails with a little bit information about us. So this is how you can enroll for our course. So remember, if you want to learn how to create visuals just like that, this is the place to go. So now we've got our render ready and we can open our Photoshop. Since this render is almost 100% ready without any post-production, we're just going to play around with my favorite tool in Photoshop, and that's Filter Camera Raw. So guys, we're getting a little bit closer to our to the end. So if you have any questions, you may ask them now, and if we get enough questions, we're going to do a Q&A with you. So guys, if you have it, just hit me. And yes, obviously in Photoshop you don't do too much. You don't want to go do over dramatic shots. You just want to add a little bit to it. And remember, do not over Photoshop your work. You want to keep it clean, and you don't want to waste too much time, because when your client asks you for any redos, you are going to really save a lot of time for a lot of shots if your render is going to be perfect from the very start. Okay guys, this is it. This is how you create beautiful exteriors in under 2 hours. Without really talking all about those elements, we would be able to really achieve it in under an hour. But since I was hoping that you're going to actually get something out of this course and out of our webinar, I just had to go a little bit slower. So guys, as I said, this is it. Please visit our Instagram, subscribe to our YouTube channel, give us a like, thumbs up, ring the bell, because we're going to add a few extra videos later on, basically next week. And guys, visit our Instagram, follow us there, and visit our website to enroll to our course. Remember, a number of seats is limited. Do you need to buy 3ds Max license to be able to join the course? In this case, no. You can work on student's license as long as you are a student, or you can also try to use the trial version for the whole duration of our course. It's going to be enough, and along the way it's going to be really fun to work in this software. If you are from UK, US, Australia, New Zealand, or Canada, you can also Google something called Indie license. That can be a great help to all of you guys that that are just starting your journey with 3D, and you already don't have any option to use your 3ds Max as a indie license, as a trial license. Yes, this video will be put up and you will be able to follow all of this. If you want to get your floor plans for this video, you can visit our YouTube and check our this video's description. You can download the floor plans and you will be able to do the same shots as I did. Okay guys, this is amazing. Thank you very much for your attention. Since we don't have any more questions, this is going to be the moment where we say goodbye. So see you in our next webinar, which is coming really quite soon. So thank you again for your attention and see you in the next webinar.